All right. Yeah. This is fine, Tanya. Perfect. All right. So we'll get started. Welcome everyone for this webinar. Today, again, this is series 2 of a very exciting topic that we are going to focus on, which is what are the post-MBA career options, right? So before I get started, I would like all the people who are attending this webinar, if you could just post on the chat window, let us know where you're joining from. This will give us a very good idea about where you're joining us from, and we will be able to help you around your questions throughout the webinar. Kolkata, okay. Hi Rakesh. Hi Gautam Raj from Coimbatore. Kolkata, okay, we have quite a few people from Kolkata. Okay, Tanya is joining us from Mumbai. I'm here in Bangalore. The weather here is very, very gloomy today. And I'm not sure how is it for you, Tanya?
Pretty humid, Shrikala.
Yeah. All right, cool. So what we'll do is we'll get started, and let me just introduce myself. So I'm Shrikala. I'm the co-founder of Crackverbal. I have been in the technology background for quite some time before I joined Crackverbal full time. I'm also the ISB Goldman Sachs fellow of the Women Entrepreneur Program. I'm also a mentor at the Cherry Briar Foundation, where I help women entrepreneurs across the world, especially from the tech sector. I would also like to invite and welcome Tanya. Tanya is an alum from Wharton. Tanya, if you could just briefly introduce yourself. I have a lot of questions for you, a lot of questions that students have sent us already, MBA aspirants who have sent us already. So if you could just briefly introduce yourself so that, I'll take you through all the other questions I have for you in a while.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Great to be a part of this, and thanks, Shrikala, for this opportunity. So I'm currently heading marketing for a diagnostics company in Mumbai, headquartered in Mumbai. Prior to this, I was in pharmaceutical marketing in Abbott. So I was leading marketing for the women's health division at Abbott and also the liver portfolio. So I've been in healthcare for about 7 years now, specializing in marketing across all different companies that I've been in. Prior to this, I did my MBA at Wharton. I majored in marketing and operations. I'm an undergrad from St. Stephen's, with maths being my major. And other than this, I enjoy kickboxing, I enjoy yoga, and also I love exploring coffee combinations across the world. So cultural coffee interest connoisseur, you can say.
Awesome. So cool. So I will just put some ground rules for people who are listening to us. Any questions, please put it on the Q&A window. We will make sure that we answer all your questions which are in scope of this particular webinar for sure. I have allocated last 15 minutes just to focus on the questions. So please make sure you put your questions on the Q&A window or on the comment section. And I will definitely make sure I answer your questions, right? So cool. So let's get started then. Before I get started, I'll just want to quickly talk a little bit about Crackverbal. So we are a test prep and an admission consulting company. We have helped students get into top schools across the world. So if you see, most of the logos are already there on this slide, and since it's round 1 is already over and round 2 is something that is in plan in January. So if any of you are looking at help, or you want any kind of help with respect to your applications, please let us know. We would be more than happy to help you with your plan and your journey around your next steps, right? So cool. So here's what we are going to discuss today. We are going to talk about Tanya's journey to Wharton, her experience at Wharton, and more about a career in marketing. And that is specifically what I want to focus on today. Right. So Tanya, before I get on to even the MBA journey, you have a very different background, right? Your undergrads from St. Stephen's was in mathematics, right? So tell me a little bit about your pre-MBA life. What was it all about? And, how, I think before you did your MBA, you had around 4 years of experience, or 4 to 5 years of experience, right? So tell me a little bit about that, so that we get an idea about what it takes to get into an Ivy League school.
Sure. So undergrad, so I'll start with my undergrad. So maths was actually by default happened to me. It was not something that was my first preference. I got great scores in both economics and maths. But because I was getting St. Stephen's and the brand name has been like known across families, across my family and everyone I know, I realized that it might, and I decently liked maths. I never hated it. I actually quite loved it across subjects. So I chose to do maths honors at Stephen's, and I wanted that brand name. At that point, I didn't know where I'll go for my MBA. Even CAT was an option. So I had not thought that much in detail. But now when I look back, I feel that was the best decision I made, because again, the schools that you go to and the brands also make a lot of difference going forward. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but that's a part of the journey towards applying for an MBA. So that was the first step. Within St. Stephen's, all my extracurriculars were in the nonprofit segment. So I had worked even all across my school life with blind women, so visually impaired women, and helping them, tutoring them in different subjects. Along with that, at St. Stephen's, I was leading the Wildlife Society. So this was predominantly working with WWF, Delhi office, organizing festivals and for different types of species of animals going into extinction. So spreading that awareness and all of that. I also worked with National Human Rights Commission on a disability manual as part of my internship in Stephen. So a lot of work was actually in the social sector. So it's predominantly called the non-traditional background, as you say, for applying. While my friends actually all had a lot of experience in the consulting or economics, along with the extracurricular that they were doing. But at that point, I realized, when I was actually in my third year, I realized that I really want to do an MBA because I want to get an overall general management experience. I want to get into the commercial space. And I thought that just with, with my social background and the experience I've had so far, I might not end up directly getting a job in a commercial kind of a role, whether it's marketing or finance. That's what actually intrigued, was one of the first trigger for me to actually apply for an MBA. Now, global versus India was the next thing that I was actually looking for. And my brother had already gone to Harvard at that point. And so I had a lot of understanding about what a global Ivy League MBA entails, the kind of experience I visited campus. And I realized that the diversity that kind of exists in the global schools is way higher than an Indian school. So while I did apply to ISB, I did get in. I also at the same time had applied to a couple of Ivy League schools, including Wharton. So Wharton admit ended up happening 1 month later after ISB. So I'd given my deposit to ISB, and then I got through Wharton, and I chose Wharton just so that I can get the global diversity exposure.
Right. So interesting that you said, Tanya, more that your experience was completely around the social sector kind of a thing, right? So this is one question that most MBA aspirants also have, right? So when they showcase that their entire experience was around social, and then they want to move on to a commercial kind of a background, how do they, what do they convince the adcom about that? Why does it make sense for you to move from social to a commercial kind of a background, and why does MBA make sense for you at that point?
So definitely, I think one of the first things when I wrote this in my essay as well was that an MBA will actually give me expertise and skill set in finance, in strategy, in marketing, which I do not have with the current experience I have. Had I wanted to become a social entrepreneur, actually not even an entrepreneur, had I wanted to just continue my journey in the social sector, take up a job in the social sector, that wouldn't have then made sense to kind of apply an MBA. I wanted to shift. I want to shift my expertise from the social space to a commercial space. So, I mean, any job that you need in finance or economics or marketing, MBA is pretty much the stepping stone to kind of making that switch. If and US in general, US or Europe, they are very heavily bent on not or discounting the experience that you've had before the MBA to land up the job that you want after the MBA. An example being that if you want to become a lawyer in the US, you can still kind of go and do, no matter whatever you're doing here in India, you can actually make that switch. So US schools, I felt, were actually a little more encouraging from that perspective as well, to make that switch into the commercial space. and this not considering any experience you have, whether it's non-traditional, as a weakness. In fact, in my case, it was actually considered as a strength, because they had a lot of people, a lot of engineers, a lot of people from analytical background, a lot of people from finance background already applying. So there you're already competing with with your kind of people, right? People with similar backgrounds. Non-traditional background, and especially the year I applied, was obviously a niche kind of set of people. There were not many who had only purely non-traditional background, and that kind of gives you an edge as well to get into a good school.
Right, right. So more from the experience perspective also, right? Typically, they say that Wharton is more like a higher experience level friendly school, right?
Yes.
Compared to maybe a Harvard or any other
Yeah.
school. What made you feel that 4 years was a good amount of time for you to actually go ahead and apply, and your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So I actually first applied in 3 years and not to Wharton. At that point, I'd applied to Harvard and Cornell.
Hmm.
And I think I'd got also done Darden, maybe. Yeah, three schools I had applied then, and I did not get in. In fact, at Cornell, I made it to the wait list and then didn't end up getting. At that point, the feedback that I got was that, get 1 more years of experience. So that I had 3 years. So then I worked for another year. I actually shifted the job that I was also doing. So I was in HR consulting. I went into sustainability as well,
Hmm.
something that I also was passionate about. I added another year of experience there, and by the time I would actually get into a school, I would have 5 years. So that's how I kind of calculated it. So this was the second attempt that I tried at Wharton, and actually I second attempt, I first time applied to Wharton, but it was my second attempt at applying to an MBA school.
Right, right. So when you apply to schools, especially in US, right, there is a lot of research and a lot of background work that goes on even before you start writing your essays. Typically, in your, since you've also been a mentor, what is your view on how much time an aspirant should actually spend on research? What kind of research should they do? Whom should they actually reach out? Especially when you're applying to such high ranking schools, which has so much of competition, right? You are all of them who are applying are, applying with really great profiles and great GMAT scores. So in your view, what do you think they should be looking at, and how should they be going about with their research and their background work before they even actually start applying?
Yeah, so I think firstly, it's very important to read up the website of the schools. A lot of time I speak to applicants, who are applying for the first time, and they'll just be like, oh, I didn't know they had this program. Oh, I didn't know this is a club. I didn't know. So I think you need to be really sure about the facts of what the school offers as a first stepping stone. So have that information in terms of your area of interest and how the school kind of, what are the offerings of school. Suppose, for example, I'm interested, say, in sustainability. I will actually do my research on the school website to understand what clubs or associations or programs the school offers in sustainability, and be very clear of that. That's the first step. Once you know that, okay, these are these few schools who are providing anything interesting in sustainability and they kind of match my personality, is when I start talking out or reaching out to the alums of the schools. What I actually did was really helpful is that I actually went on the website, looked at certain clubs of interest, and I actually reached out and emailed directly the VPs and the presidents of those clubs. Some of them were very nice and actually responded instantly to do a chat. I scheduled that. I also did my research so that I knew everything about the school in terms of the clubs and all of that. So I didn't come across as someone, the worst thing that can happen is when you speak to an alum or someone who's a current student, you say, oh, I don't know. I need to go back and read the website. You need to come across as someone who's actually kind of already gone through all of that. And then you just want to understand the student experience. So that would be the first step. Reach out to the students in the areas of your interest, whether it's a club or it's a major or something. Or you can do it like randomly on LinkedIn or actually the school website. Speak to alums, because it's very important to understand what the school stands for. There are different schools which stand for different things. In my mind, where I actually made that segmentation where I knew Wharton stood for team leadership. When I say team leadership, it was very collaborative leadership. It was not that one single leader. It was actually a team leading together. And whereas Harvard is a lot more on like single leadership and all of that. Kellogg is so good in marketing. It's a very different kind of a environment that exists in that. It's way more fun friendly. So there are schools that are serious schools, and also you understand the personality of each school if you actually speak to the alums and people who are kind of already there leading certain clubs.
Mm. Right, right. So, what is the timeline do you think people should spend on research? More around, should they just start, say, for example, now that they have round 2 in January, right? So, what is an ideal time they should be spending around research and, getting to know what they really want to write in their essays?
So I would suggest at least 3, 4 months in advance, you should know which are the schools that you're applying to. I mean, definitely helps if you know of earlier than that. But if you don't, then you know that there's going to be a deadline coming up. So at least 3 months in advance, you should know which are your top schools. It need not be one, obviously. You need to have certain short list of 4 or 5 schools. There are certain safety schools, there are certain Ivy Leagues. So have a good mix of schools that you know that you can be interested in. So at that point, and spend that 1 month kind of speaking out to the alums, understanding before you begin your essay. It's only after that 1 month, maybe you spend 2.5 months on essays. I don't think there's a standard timeline on the amount you spend on the essays, because I feel sometimes even a year is not enough. It's an essay is your life story, and you have to really self-actualize, go deep within the person you are and your soul to kind of. It's like writing your own autobiography, honestly. So there's no like the time spent on it is never enough, right? But given that you have a deadline, you take that 3 month period to figure out. So first month actually spent on understanding the school, speak to the alums and all of that, and 2 months on the essay, because an essay goes through many iterations. So you should give yourself enough time to make sure that you're submitting the best version.
Right, right. Once you get into Wharton, right? So your journey, right? So once you got into Wharton, there is a mindset that you have that, okay, this is what I think Wharton will be, right? Tell me a little bit about your maybe first semester, or when you actually started with your journey. What was your experience, and a little bit more about what you thought it was and what it actually was.
Yeah, so for me, it was the first time staying away from home and family. I had not even stayed away in a boarding school in India. So the first time I was actually staying away from my parents and my family was going abroad, living by myself completely on my own. So it was a very, very difficult experience initially, because I was obviously very homesick for the first few months. But when I went to Wharton, I think the good and the bad part was that there were so many students. So when you see a batch of 850 students all together, then there are cohorts and there are learning teams being formed, and there are so many exercises that keep you busy. Sometimes it's like it's overwhelming that you can't meet so many people, and there are people who are kind of arranging events every single day. There are 5 to 6 events, dinners, coffee chats happening as soon as you're in the school, as soon as you're admitted on your day one. And it gets a little overwhelming for some people, and for some people it's extremely exciting. So it depends on the personality you have. I was always like an introvert kind of a person, so for me it was a little overwhelming. I had to take it slow. I think the best advice that I got was also from an alum was that people will like tell you to join 20 things when you're on your day one. You need to join 15 clubs. You will be told to get into 15 events. Please don't do that. Prioritize 2 or 3 things that you will actually be able to sustain and carry forward. And that's exactly what I did. And that helped me significantly to manage my work, my extracurriculars, my tests and everything. Because you need to understand the first semester specifically and the first year is intense at any business school. If it's a 2-year program, your 1 year is going to be very, very intense, because all your core subjects, if you've not been able to wave them off, all your important competitive core curriculum will actually be your first year. And you will understand that as soon as people join schools and start attending classes, they will also be extremely competitive. They'll feel that, okay, now I've aced this, I need to ace all my tests. So suddenly the energy is really high, and you're competing with so many people who have kind of done amazing things, right? And they may have more years of experience, or they might, in fact, be even expertise in certain core subjects, and you'll be competing with them. In fact, I had like people who were running private equity, leading private equity, and actually taking up capital markets and finance classes. They refuse to waive those off. Now, how do you compete with that, right? Somebody who kind of does that for a living, and then I'm coming from the social sector who's never touched capital markets or understand what option pool is and all of that. So it was pretty intense for the first semester at least. But then I think the fact that I actually chose to do 3 to 4 things and not more than that kind of helped me settle in the system.
Right. So how is the cohort? Like when you say 850, people, is it like, do they have like a batch kind of a system or a cohort kind of a system, or they're all together, going through the same electives and the same courses? How does it actually work?
So for the first year, most people, unless you wave out of the core curriculum, are going through the same subjects. It's only the second year kind of gets you see lesser people. Typically, a cohort is about 60 to 70 people. And then Wharton also has a cluster. So cluster is a mix of 3 to 4 cohorts altogether put in. So initially, there's a lot of focus on not just your cohort bonding, but cluster bonding. That means you need to kind of know the names of 200 to 300 people all at once, because then you're clustered together and you're doing a lot of events and you're competing with other clusters and all of that. So that was a very interesting exercise.
Right. And tell me the diversity of the cohort, right? Like how many, nationalities, like how many people from different countries, and, male-female ratio, how was that?
Yeah, so it was diverse in every sense. I think they do an algorithm to kind of make every cohort diverse. It was diverse in terms of not just the gender ratio, it was diverse in terms of the years of experience. It was also the kind of different work people had done. So people from all across the industries were actually, so you had a representative from every industry. I don't think there was any industry missing in my cohort or any other cohort. You also had people who were extremely senior, much older than you, to people who were much younger and just like seemed like they just had like 2 years of work ex coming in. And gender diversity, obviously, Wharton kind of plays in high women percentage. So at my year, it was about 60-40, but now it's increasing to 70 or even 75, I hear.
Right. And more from Indian applicants' perspective, right? Like, what is the typical percentage of people applying or getting in from India, if you have a rough number around that?
I can't say number of people applying from India, but yeah, about 20% of the entire Wharton was Indians, but those included NRIs. I would say about 3 to 4% were Indians from India.
Okay. So just 3 to 4%.
Yeah,
the number that
Indians from India.
Okay.
They don't have like a set number that they need so many. It actually depends on the profiles of the students as well. There were years where this was much higher. There were about 10% of the class was Indians from India directly coming in also. And then there were more NRIs in certain other years as well.
Right. So when do you actually get to select your electives and your specialization?
End of first year.
Okay. And what made you choose marketing and operations as your specialization?
So that was a very interesting story. I was actually going to major in strategy. And I was pretty set on that. I knew that I wanted to do consulting, and this is something that I was actually the VP of the consulting club. So I was pretty sure that I wanted to actually do strategy. But then I ended up taking a few just to try it out, because your electives, you have options. And the good part about Wharton is it's grade non-disclosure, right? So even if you don't have a strength in something, it's fine. The grade is not going to be reported. So you can actually choose to literally fail. I mean, you cannot say fail, but actually get the lowest percentile, and it's fine. You can get up to 3 lowest percentile credits in a year, and it's okay, you can make it up and all of that. So that gave me an opportunity to kind of try different things. I took brand management. I also took a course called Contagion in Marketing, which talks about, if anybody's read Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. So it talks about how things catch on and how certain things are different. These are very interesting subjects, but actually think about, how the stickiness of the brand is actually created in the consumer's mind. Now that really excited me. And then I ended up randomly having a conversation with one of my seniors at Wharton. At that point, I was in first year, she was in second year, doing really well. A very famous, popular senior was into a lot of extracurricular. And she told me she's majoring in operations and marketing as a joint major. And I was pretty shocked, and I asked her, does something like this even exist? Why would somebody come to Wharton and actually major in marketing and operation? And she told me, you don't know the kind of professors we have. It's a very exciting program at Wharton. And at that kind of made me very excited, because then it gave me a choice to do something I'm actually interested in than just randomly doing things that were set on paper that everybody's doing strategy and finance, let me just major in that. When I actually looked at the list of professors, when I looked at the kind of program that they had in marketing and operations, I thought that would be extremely useful. And this might be something that I actually want my future in. So I joined the marketing club. I took these courses, and yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun.
So how does this work? I've heard about other business schools having a bidding system in terms of the way you choose your electives and stuff like that. Is it the same way how it works at Wharton too?
It was at the year that I went, but now they've kind of gone away with that bidding system, because a lot of people learn to game that. So now it's more like preferences and all of that. But I don't know how do they do the analytics, but it's more like preference based. You have to give your preferences as a top 2 to 3 preferences, and that's how electives are allotted.
Okay. And more in terms of the internships that you get, right? It's also said that when you have a 2-year MBA program, you get to do multiple internships, which actually gives you an idea around what electives to choose and what could be your area of expertise. Is that also a strategy that, you did or you would suggest other people should do?
Yeah, so I did my internship at BCG in consulting. And at that point, again, I was very interested in consulting, knew that that's going to be my future. Having tried that, I did really enjoy it. And that's when I decided that this is not what I want to do. That gave me a very good indicator of, this is not what I want to major in. This is not my future and career options. So yeah, internships are definitely really helpful from that perspective.
Right, right. And more from the marketing perspective, right? Like, Wharton is not very known for marketing as a marketing school, right? Maybe Kellogg is known more for a marketing school. Why is that? Why do people have that kind of a perception? Is it because of more in terms of proximity of the companies that come for hiring, or why does that kind of a perception come?
No, actually, that's not true. In fact, there were a lot of top marketing firms, but we had we had P&G, we had General Mills. There were actually the top marketing firms, and they hire a lot of people from Wharton. So I don't think it's the number of firms, but yeah, a lot of people end up going for a finance or a strategy as a major at Wharton. So it's more like, a lot of people go there, and those have some great professors as well. I think in terms of ranking, those are one of the best ranked professors overall when you look at MBA across Ivy Leagues. So finance at Wharton is known better than a lot of other schools. So because that's number one, a lot of times people conveniently ignore the number 3 or the number 4, and then, they end up choosing different things. In my case, I was not sure I wanted to do marketing. In fact, I joined MBA knowing that I wanted to do strategy. So this was never when I look back, if I actually would have researched for marketing, I may have known a lot more about Kellogg versus Wharton and taken that call. This was only end of first year is when I actually decided I want to shift to marketing, and it ended up having a great program. So I was pretty happy with it.
Right. So, there's also this perception that if you're looking at a US market, you don't, as an international student, do not get many opportunities in marketing in US, especially because marketing is very culture driven, and you need to understand the brand and stuff like that. So, if you could just throw some light on what are the kind of marketing opportunities international students can get, because for us, it also has to have an H1 sponsored kind of a thing, right? So what are the various options that people can look at when it comes to marketing and operations, and what should be the kind of approach they should take if they're especially interested in marketing?
Yeah, so I actually so at Wharton, at least, I did not feel that there was a cultural issue in terms of getting a job in marketing. For me, it was anyway a personal decision to kind of move back at the end of the second year. But overall, I was given an equal opportunity by all companies. The only concern overall was with the H1B visa. A lot of times, some companies sponsor it, some companies don't sponsor it. And that's how you kind of have to make your decision. Wharton has a good career management office to kind of help you narrow down your options in terms of which are the companies that are sponsoring. So whether it's finance, strategy, marketing, tech, or a startup, it all depends on your H1B at the end of it. And that's when you kind of make that decision. It's not different if you just want to do marketing versus any other discipline. So marketing and operations is not tougher for an international student versus other streams. I did not face that at all.
Okay. And
in fact, I got hired on campus for a real estate job. Yeah.
Right. So what are the kind of roles people get in when it comes to marketing and operations, especially after an MBA?
So there are different companies have different programs. Most likely, a marketing program would actually have a stint-based kind of a program. So like a management associate kind of a role, where you go across different functions, including marketing. Do your sales stint, do your marketing stint, then a little bit of finance maybe, and then go back to like a long-term role in marketing. So a lot of times these companies will offer you the stint-based programs, unless you have done marketing in the past where you immediately given that core role in marketing, but they're open to both aspects. So you'll have your Pepsis of the world and all of that who are offering you the stint-based program.
Right. So more like a leadership.
Develop, yeah, more like that.
So where you try out different roles and then you figure out what you're really good at, and then you continue.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So, how did an MBA change your whole perspective towards how you look at, business, or how you look at the typical challenges that you face, in your professional life?
I think tremendously. I would definitely not know 90% of what I know if I had not done the MBA, because my knowledge was very limited and raw. Being from an Indian education background, then only doing my undergrad in India and only getting that much of exposure would actually give me very little information on how businesses work globally. And MBA definitely pushes you to kind of learn a lot more for things that are happening across the world. For example, again, now marketing in Brazil, we had to do a case study about how Unilever became popular in Brazil, and how it started with a small community and then it became a big community, and then it was a more community focused marketing, which was a very different approach from regular marketing that you look at. So we had all these interesting case studies, how price wars actually work between companies. So why Pepsi and Cola, and how have they been competing for a really long time, because they know they cannot reduce the price further. So all of these things actually are significantly important to learn. I don't think I would have actually had any exposure to that in India. The other interesting thing an MBA school offers is that, and this is one of the core classes that you'll do, is actually the marketing 101, right? That will actually be a simulation experience. So we as a learning team had to go through a simulation of launching a new brand. And so every week there will be new iteration. For example, now you have another brand which is the same price or lower, has dropped the price. What will you do? How will you, what will you actually lower your price, or will you offer something else? Will you look at value adding? So there was co-joint analysis added to it and all of that. So we would do that weekly, and there was a competition across learning teams to understand that. So this was a live marketing example, and you don't get this kind of exposure unless you go to a business school.
Okay, so what you mean is companies actually come with their specific problems, and they work with the students to actually come up with some options. Is that what?
No. This was a simulation created by the business school themselves. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Other than that, the case studies already exist. So these company case studies are already exist in all the courses that you have, the core courses, which every MBA student anyway has to go through, irrespective of what they want to specialize in. So that gives you a lot of good exposure in terms of how different companies kind of made efforts and how marketing changed the game across. So an example being United versus Southwest Airlines and all of that.
Right. So how does recruitment happen? Recruitment, or, in Indian words, placements, right? So I know, especially when it comes to US schools, USB schools, it's not like you have day one placements and day two placements and things like that, how it works in Indian schools, right? So how does that work? There is a career services that helps you put you through the right people. If you could just throw some light on how do people actually end up getting jobs?
Yeah, so pretty much it starts with, I think it's somewhere in October, end of November, that you'll start with coffee chats. Coffee chats are pretty much, you'll have different companies kind of show up across different industries. So they have a timeline on finance, consulting, marketing, your entrepreneurs, tech, startups and all of that. So they'll have like a timeline on when these are coming to school on campus to talk to you about their company, about the kind of people they want to hire. That's pretty much followed by a coffee chat. That way you can actually schedule that some time with those people who are coming from different companies, understand them, they can understand you. So this kind of pretty much goes on November and December. January is called the dip week at Wharton, where the interviews start happening. So they begin with the consulting and the finance interviews, and then there's marketing and other industries going forward. Jan and Feb is when that timeline is. They call it dip week because there's this 1 week which is extremely snowy, and then it's pretty hard to kind of get to school. But at that point, you have maximum number of companies coming for interviewing you. So that's when the interviews happen, and pretty much the offer is released around March or April.
Right. So there's also one more, analysis around, when you actually choose the school of your choice, you might also want to look at the proximity of the companies which are around that school, more around where you want to work. Is that, is that an approach people should look at when they actually choose the school of where?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because when you have all these big companies kind of coming to you, they have offices all across the world. In fact, when you're applying to them for your first step is the application, they will give you an option of choosing the location that you want to go to, and that's when you can give your top preferences. Only thing to be very careful there is that don't end up just saying New York or San Francisco, because those are the most popular cities. There's a lot of competition, and if that's their only choice, it'll be really hard to get in. But other than that, if you're kind of open to kind of move around across, there's a lot of opportunity across. So it doesn't depend on where your school is based.
Right, right. And what was your journey after your MBA? If you could just tell us a little bit more about that part also.
Yeah. So after my MBA, interestingly, I was again in a management stint. I was offered a management stint in a real estate company. I worked in Bangalore and Surat in Gujarat across that. So that included marketing, legal, finance, strategy, all of that. That was pretty interesting because I was out of business school. I could immediately apply a lot of skills that I had learned as part of my core curriculum in live on the job. And I think MBA gives you that edge, right? You feel that you're a generalist rather than a specialist. So you feel like you can actually understand different fields. So the stint-based program, I could understand law really well, surprisingly. And I think that's just the typical training my mind went through when I was doing my MBA, that I could actually look at different fields that I have no exposure in and do well at them. So that part was pretty interesting. Other than that, I think from a social perspective, because I was an introvert, I could actually network much better than I used to. I learned those skills to do that better. 2013 was when I graduated, or 2013 onwards, I actually did a great job. I worked in that sector for a year. Then I've landed a great job in the healthcare marketing space, which was again very exciting. That was my best stint because I actually got an opportunity to lead a brand which was not growing at all, and then bring it to 9 times of volume growth that it had in 3 years ago. So that was extremely exciting. We did a lot of innovation with that brand in healthcare. So that has been an exciting journey.
Right. So how is it about, when you come back to India, right? Maybe when you're, how do you, because when you're in US and what you learn, what you do, is there like a perfect mapping to what you see in the business world in India? How does it work? Or is there some kind of, change of perspective, or, the way you look at business in India, or, the way what you learned in US, was there a major difference in terms of how you approached your challenges and your problems, or typical situations that you faced at work?
Definitely. I think what majorly changed was looking at the big picture. A lot of times, my previous job as well, before I went to the US, my approach, and in fact, even a lot of my peers and colleagues' approach towards business was that now and when, this month sales, this month business, getting up next month. Okay, chalo, next year, let's think about what we'll do in next year. Coming from Wharton and doing this MBA made me realize that it has to be like a 5-year vision rather than just a short-term kind of a vision that you need to have towards business. And that was highly valued wherever I worked, because most of the companies are kind of, a lot of times businesses fail because they forget to look at futuristic vision and just look at now and right now and next month and getting the sales number met for next month. So that was the approach that I definitely gotten wherever I worked. I'm currently in a leadership role in my team. I instill that day and night as well. Innovation is the second thing. A lot of times, and this happened to me because I had lesser exposure before I moved to the US. I was very risk averse. I would never take any risk. I would never innovate because of that. Anything new I wanted to do, which was different from the traditional ways a company would actually work in, a business would work in, would actually be something I was very scared to try on. since the time I actually came back, I've just been trying new things. So an example would be in healthcare marketing. Pretty much when you're growing a brand, what you end up doing is you reach out to the doctors, and then you ensure that there's a patient journey, so patients are adopting the brand or the product and all of that. What we worked in was basically understanding the diagnosis of the disease area that the product was actually catering to. So that means we launched test, which was diagnostic test all across, partnering with labs and collaborating with them to ensure that patients understand what this test is for and why they need that medicine for diagnosing which disease. So these are certain things that you actually start looking at when you kind of get that exposure. So big picture and innovation is something that I would say.
Right. So your career progression has been phenomenal, and even after your MBA, right? So what next for you, right? You've been almost 8 years after an MBA now.
Yeah.
What is next for you, and what is your vision?
Yeah, so I think I've always wanted to get back to the social sector, and now as an entrepreneur, pretty much. I don't know how I will be able to actually put it across, but I want somewhere a social business module to be kind of added in, and social sector is pretty much looked at as a non-profit space, that there's no profit there, and slowly it's kind of changing. And I feel that there should be like a for-profit social space that should be done. So I sometimes look at a vocational institute for women with visual impairment or something like that, which can kind of be combined to like a for-profit space. So these are some of my long-term visions that I do have going forward.
All right. So I'll do one thing with that. I think I have most of my questions, pretty much covered. What I will do is I'll open the forum for people to ask questions. If you have any specific questions, you can put it on the chat window or on the Q&A window. Or if you could, Rahil, if you could just help me paste the questions that people have asked on the comment section, if that is, I would like to take those things. Okay, so there is a question which says, I've done an MBA already in marketing from a 2-tier school in India, and I'm looking at a double MBA from Canada. How should I proceed? So Sankalp, what is your specific question? Like, is your question around whether you should do another MBA, or is it specifically about how a double MBA is looked at? Maybe we would like you to be slightly more clear on this question. If you could just clarify that aspect. All right. So there is one other question which says, one question, maybe Tanya, I can ask, which is relevant to what this person has also asked is, did you consider, other than US, were you considering other options also, apart from India? You said you applied to a few Indian schools also, but were you also looking at other countries, or was US the only option that you looked at more for to apply to a B school?
So I did look at INSEAD in Europe as one of the options. I did not apply there, especially because it was a 1-year MBA. Now, this is my bias that I feel a 1-year MBA does not give you the same experience that a 2-year MBA can. A 1-year MBA can be very intense, and it clubs the 2-year programs into a 1 year. So if you can imagine how intense that can be. So I wanted that time to myself. I wanted that experience to kind of grow and understand the school, understand my community, understand the diversity, network with people, which is why I chose a 2-year program, which is why US was my top choice.
Right. So, Tanya, for somebody who has, 7 to 8 years experience, would you still feel that a 2-year MBA might be a good option? Like, what is your view? What would you suggest to someone who has slightly more experience? Because, right now we are seeing a lot of applicants with more than 7, 8 years experience looking at applying for an MBA program, right? So, more from your perspective, since you've gone through that entire 2-year course, and that your cohort also had people with various kind of experience backgrounds, what is your view on people applying to 2-year programs with higher experience levels?
So I think I personally feel that's a more personal decision than a professional one, because in my cohort also I had people who were with 10 years of experience as well who were a part of this, and not just my cohort. There were a lot of senior people, older people, part of different cohorts as well. It does not limit you to get into a school. If you have a higher experience, it definitely increases your chances, is what I will say. But from a personal standpoint, there are people who have the set goal that by this year I want to kind of land up a job in this country, or do this by this year. So if you have certain goals in terms of, or pressure in terms of timeline, that's when you kind of need to make this decision 2 years versus 1 year. However, having said that, if you have the time, if you have the option of kind of getting that experience, or you're kind of free flow in that manner, definitely 2 years is what I would recommend to most people.
Right, right. So I think there's one other question which, Tanya, he's asking about what are the opportunities in marketing in these countries after you do an MBA specializing in marketing. I think Tanya has already addressed that. We spoke about leadership programs. Apart from that, Tanya, anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, so one part is, you go to the FMCG. When you say FMCG in India, there's a consumer goods in the US, that's, as they call it. You have all these companies who are coming to campus. So those are those established old school companies, like your General Mills is pretty old school. Campbell's Soup is if you've heard of, and all of that. So those are those old school companies who've been established for many years, who are coming. Those are one part. The others is startups. A lot of startups are actually looking for roles, and not a lot more now. In the marketing space. So you have startups from all over the US who will actually kind of also be options to reach out for roles in marketing. Then there is obviously healthcare marketing. At that point, so healthcare in itself as the industry, there are so many companies that are coming in. So there are roles across. There's strategy, there's finance, there's marketing within in each big healthcare company. So it depends on what you're really interested in. The options are immense.
Right, right. Wharton also has these dual programs, right? There is a Lauder, program. What are your views around those aspects, especially as international applicants? Anything around that? Like they have.
Yeah, I think programs like Lauder have been extremely interesting. So I've had friends who've been a part of this. A lot of times, a lot of them were actually also NRIs who wanted to also connect with people from all across the world, and also so some of the courses in Lauder were actually also Hindi as a starting point. So learn Hindi and all of that. So there were these NRIs who hadn't spoken Hindi or had not learned Hindi, and they got the opportunity to understand their own mother tongue, got an opportunity to come to Bombay, understand the culture in Bombay and all of that. So these are very interesting programs if you're interested in spending a few months in the cultural aspect of things. So you'll have people all across the world who will be coming for that. So if you're interested in that, definitely apply.
Right. And how active is the Wharton alumni community, and what all do they do?
So as Wharton alums, so right now I'm a part of the admissions alum committee. So that's called the Yield program, where you kind of give back to Wharton by mentoring and coaching other admits. So these are people, so they'll organize these information sessions twice a year, and then I'm a part of that. And then you share your experience, and then you also speak to other potential admits to help them make that final decision of saying a yes or a no to Wharton, and kind of coach them and mentor them across before they start school. So that's one part of the Wharton Alumni Network. Then you also have the Wharton India Club, which obviously continues to organize events in Delhi and Bombay, a lot of networking events. And then you get to interact with Wharton alums from across many years. So you have much senior alums as well who are part of this, who have actually now become CEOs of different businesses.
Right, right. Since you mentioned, more from an admission committee perspective, right? Is there kind of a DNA that Wharton looks for in a candidate?
So as I said earlier, I think one thing that I found very unique in Wharton was the team leadership and the collaboration aspect. I had done enough research on other schools and not seen this very peculiar thing. It was pretty much like a mandatory thing, right? You need to have a leadership exposure, but you also need to show somewhere as a team where you kind of work through a challenge or a failure. How did you come across it? What really values failures? If you have certain learnings from anything that you failed as a team and you learned something from it, that's highly valued. So I think collaboration and the team leadership aspect is something that you really, really need to have in that DNA. Should be able to show in your resume and your essays.
Right. Let me just look at if there are any more questions which are more relevant. Okay, so Udit, your question is more around doing a second MBA and, how do hiring companies look at, it doesn't really matter. See, frankly, if your first MBA, I mean, I'll just take this question, Tanya. So basically, if you're doing a second MBA, which is, most probably your first MBA would be without any experience. So I'm assuming that you're doing a second MBA more for global exposure and international exposure. I think the focus will be more around what you've, why you really need to do an MBA and what is your plan after an MBA. So, those aspects will matter most. And in terms of good question here, maybe I can take that for Tanya. Tanya, more around switching industries, right? So when somebody comes from a completely different industry, how easy is it to, because people have, various forums have various theories around it, that people with a lot of experience cannot actually switch their industry after an MBA, or in US it might not be possible and things like that. So what is your view around people completely changing their industry profiles after an MBA?
That's actually not true. In fact, at Wharton, I saw so many people. So I anyway came from a niche background, so I got into a completely different industry. But other than me, also there were so many people who were like, as I said, have been working with a PE fund for a really, really, really long time, and then switched to consulting as a career. And there were consultants who wanted to switch to PE or investment banking. So one of the senior most people in my class was actually a theater art director from Cirque du Soleil, if you've heard of that. That's in Vegas, and he went into consulting at McKinsey. He landed a job there. So I think I found that as the most interesting part, because I thought that that's something that's really highly valued, to kind of switch your career. And that's why you are here at business school, right? But then you'll have to work really hard. So while you're there, you have to, in your first year itself, build those networks, understand those courses that you need to take, depending on the industry that you're really interested in. Make sure that you've done something interesting in those, have certain brand names in those. If you know this first year in advance, and you do that internship in the industry of your choice that you want to go to. So you need to work really hard, step by step, if you really are interested in it.
Right. Cool. So thank you so much, Tanya. I think most of the questions are, something that we've already addressed. So I don't want to, take it up again. This was really informational, Tanya. Thank you so much. I think I got to know a lot of things about not only your journey, but what students should actually look at when they're actually applying to top schools, Ivy League schools, the kind of research they should be doing, the kind of challenges that they should be ready with when they are applying to schools like this, and the competition that they are going to face, and be realistic about what they want out of the school, as well as also look at what changes that they can bring in terms of their profile, and what they can expect out of a school like Wharton, right? So thank you so much, Tanya. This was excellent, and this is extremely informational. And thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely reach out to you again when we have more questions and around how we want to go, if you want to know more about Ivy League schools and more about Wharton. I really appreciate your time. For others, we also have another webinar coming up next on 12th of November, where we are going to talk about product management as the next MBA career option. So if you're interested, this is on 12th of November. So this is on product management. We have somebody who's an alum from London Business School who will be taking this session. So, and if you have any questions, queries, please reach out to us on WhatsApp or just write to us, email us. Thank you so much, Tanya, again, for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you all of you for attending this session. Please write to us if you have any questions, and you can watch this video later too, and so that you have access to the details about what it takes to get into an Ivy League school. All right.
Thank you so much.